How we doing, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Wave. We got an exciting one today. I'm joined, as always, by Isaac Popper. You know him, you love him. You can find him on Twitter at iPopStats. Another member of our Fear the Wave collective team. That actually reminds me, we're talking about the college football playoffs and how exciting is that? It's a great time to be a Tulane fan. But don't take it for granted. Make sure you contribute to Fear the Wave Collective after the season. The portal's going to open up. We have to make sure we can retain our amazing roster and even add to it in the portal. Don't take this time for granted as a Tulane fan. Do everything you can to keep this momentum going in years forward. Every penny helps. And if you can't do that, or if you can do that, you should still like the video, subscribe, comment, push this video out to more people, help the algorithm. Donate to the collective so we can be talking more about college football playoffs in the years to come. We got an exciting episode today. It's November, the end of November, and we're talking college football playoffs in Tulane. Who would have guessed it? Well, I would have. You probably did too. You know, Tulane fans know a little bit more about Tulane football, I would say, than the national media. But we do have a couple topics we're going to get through today relating all to the college football playoffs. So I'm going to kind of give you our schedule real quick here, and then we're going to get into this. First, we're going to talk about the format of the college football playoffs. It's a little confusing. It's new. Some people know it. Some people don't. Some people think they know it, but really don't. It is confusing. It's not just the 12 highest ranked teams. It's not just the 5 highest ranked conference champions and then the next 7 teams either. It's pretty complicated, so we're going to make sure that everybody knows exactly what the format looks like so you can sound super smart when you're talking about Tulane football with your friends and with your family over Thanksgiving. Next, Isaac's going to walk us through Tulane's path to the college football playoffs, what Tulane has to do, and what else has to happen around the country for Tulane to get in. Spoiler alert, Tulane does have multiple paths to the playoffs, so that's exciting. We're going to talk a little bit about how the committee's kind of viewing Tulane right now. Isaac had the chance to talk to the playoff commissioner. I believe it was yesterday, might have been the day before. But he's going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about Tulane's competition and how Tulane's being judged compared to those teams, both fairly and unfairly. And then we're going to wrap things up a little bit about what you can do, yes, you, to help Tulane's chances of making it to the playoffs this year. I'm super excited to be filming this episode right now, talking playoffs. I know you are too, Isaac. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, John. Well, I didn't know that I would be saying this after Oklahoma, but Tulane controls their destiny. Super exciting news. Last week, ESPN had them with 25% odds to make the playoff. This week, it's 31%, but that's only with a 71% chance that Tulane wins out. And we know that Tulane has a better than 70.6% chance to win out, given they give us an 80.2% chance to win the conference. And we know that Tulane is going to win the conference. We believe in Tulane football. So this is a really exciting time. If Tulane wins convincingly, then they will control their destiny and be in the college football playoff.
I have to disagree there. We can talk more later. I don't think Tulane controls their own destiny. I think we do have to rely on some things to happen, but we can have that debate later. I'm sure that'll be interesting. I'm excited to see where you're going with that too.
Winning is not good enough to control your destiny, but winning convincingly, I'm confident, will do the trick. If Tulane has 2 statement victories against Memphis tomorrow on Thanksgiving and against Army in the conference championship, which would be home if they beat Memphis, I really believe it.
We might find out. Let's talk about the format of the college football playoffs. So the 5 highest ranked conference champions automatically get in. That part is true. Then the next 7 highest ranked teams make the playoffs. That's your 12 teams. Take those 12 teams, throw out all the other teams, and now we're just thinking about these 12, right? Of the 5 conference champions that are in, the top 4 of them are placed 1 through 4 and each given a first round bye. That's important. Tulane's still in play for that bye, actually. So now you have 8 teams left, which includes the conference champion, which now, even though they won the conference, that's how they got in, but now they're, treated exactly the same as all 8 of those other teams. And those teams are ranked 5 through 12. And now you got your playoffs. This is what it looks like right now if the playoffs were to start today. I'm going to pull this up. Walk you through this a little bit just to kind of give an example. One way to kind of see what I'm talking about here is you can look at Texas on the right side of the bracket, who is the 2 seed, but they're ranked third in the poll. Why is that? Top 4 conference champions automatically get a first round bye. So Oregon, they're assuming, wins the Big Ten in this scenario. They're the 1. Ohio State is ranked second, but they don't get that second spot because they lost to Oregon in the conference championship in this scenario. So they're bumped down to 5 because they did not win their conference. And so Texas, Miami, and Boise State are all moved up because of that. It's going to get clearer as we get closer to the college football playoffs. Hopefully that helps some of y'all. It's pretty complicated. I'm sure it's probably not going to be how it is forever. My guess is that they'll expand to 16 teams sooner rather than later. But yeah, now Isaac, if you want to walk us through these scenarios, how can Tulane make the college football playoffs? You are muted.
Sorry about that, John. Just to clarify one thing, do the autonomous 4 conferences automatically get a spot in the college football playoff?
They do not. If they are ranked highest, then they do. It's not the 4 highest ranked conference champions and then the highest ranked group of 5 champion, like some people were viewing it coming into the season. It is the 5 highest ranked conference champions. So if that ends up being, for argument's sake, SEC, Big Ten, ACC, American, and then Boise State, the Big 12 might not have a spot.
Correct. And the ESPN crew was enjoying that possible scenario last night on the rankings release show. So there's 2 main paths here for Tulane. The first is that Boise State loses the conference championship game and assumes that Tulane stays ahead of UNLV. So again, winning might not be good enough in that case because Boise is very high in the rankings right now. And UNLV, who is at 22 currently, with a win over a number 11 Boise State, has the potential to jump us when we're currently 17. I don't think that's the case. I hope that wouldn't be the case. But that's part of the reason why winning convincingly will matter. And then the second path is, you've seen it on Twitter. It's the Big 12 chaos. I've been tweeting about it. Sam Lockwood from Wave After Wave has been on it for a couple of weeks. Gary Smith has been on it for a couple of weeks. And the Uptown Update's done a great job breaking down all the possible scenarios and the matchups you need to root for. So if you haven't already, make sure to check out their podcast that I went on this week. The rankings released last night was a huge success for Tulane, even though Army was unranked. Why? Well, it became official that if Tulane wins on Thursday, on Thanksgiving versus Memphis, they will be hosting the conference championship. So if they win on Thursday, general public tickets for the conference championship in Yulman for a 3rd straight season go on sale Sunday at 9 a.m. Green Wave Club gets early access, and season ticket holders can have their same seats plus 10 additional tickets. So once Tulane wins on Thursday, make sure to go get your tickets quickly. Again, general public on sale Sunday at 9 a.m. once Tulane beats Memphis, which we know they can do. Then it was Big 12 chaos. I believed that Big 12 chaos was something that could happen. I didn't expect that Tulane would be ahead of BYU this soon and so close to all the other Big 12 teams. They're only behind one Big 12 team, and that's Arizona State by 1 spot. And we're 4 spots back from Arizona State in the AP. So that's a big deal that the committee thinks that we're right there with the Big 12, especially considering that we lost to Kansas State. It sounds like maybe they actually watched that game and saw how close that game was, especially with the offensive pass interference call, a little bit of a phantom call on Dante Fleming. Not his fault. So not only are we just 1 spot ahead of Arizona State, but when we entered the bye week, we were 6 spots back of BYU. We're now ahead of BYU. When Tulane returned from their dominant win in Annapolis, 35-0, BYU is still undefeated. They were an undefeated team, and now they are behind us with both of the teams having 2 losses. Colorado State was 4 spots ahead of Tulane, and now They are 8 spots back just in 1 week. When we entered the bye week, we were 4 spots back of Colorado. Really impressive. And another important thing about the Big 12 is you can see here at 17, Tulane, 18, Iowa State. In the AP poll, Iowa State is ahead of Tulane. Also, one reason that Army fell out was because of Kansas State. Kansas State returned to the poll, which is great for Tulane. We're going to want Kansas State to win this week against Iowa State. 2 other things we want to happen in the Big 12 this week. Arizona at home over Arizona State, who's ranked ahead of us, as you can see. And then Willie Fritz. We want old friend Willie Fritz in University of Houston, some of our former players, Kentrell Webb, to beat BYU and give them a 3rd straight loss. There's a chance that BYU could even make the Big 12 championship with 3 straight losses and then win. And then I have to imagine that we'd get in over a 3-loss BYU, or for that matter, any 3-loss Big 12 team. John, how do you like those scenarios with the Big 12 chaos? You're muted, John.
You were muted. Now I was muted. Some people learn from their own mistakes. Some people learn from the mistakes of others. Some people just don't learn. I guess I don't learn. Sounds like there's 3 important Big 12 games we need to be watching this weekend. You mentioned Arizona State. Arizona State plays Arizona. Arizona State is currently 9-point favorites against Arizona. Iowa State is favored by 2.5 against Kansas State, and BYU is favored by 13 against old Willie Fritz and the Houston Cougars. We want upsets in the Big 12. The most direct path is Boise State loses, Tulane wins out, then we're in. But chaos in the Big 12 is possible, so definitely keep an eye on those games. We want upsets in the Big 12. Is that right, Isaac?
That's correct. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper quickly on some Big 12 scenarios. Thanks to Jack from the Uptown Update, has detailed some of the probabilities. There are 9 teams that are still in the hunt to be in the Big 12 Conference Championship and win the Big 12, which is unbelievable. That means that there's 256 scenarios still in play. So we're going to be watching a lot of different matchups in the Big 12 this weekend after Tulane wins on Thursday. There's about a 15% chance that whatever the matchup is going for the Big 12 Conference Championship, we know that if we win, we can get in ahead of the Big 12. No matter what even happens with Boise, we'd at least get a spot because we'd be ranked ahead of the Big 12. 15% chance of that. Then there's about a 10.5% chance that it depends who wins based on what that matchup is. And then there's also a possibility that we win convincingly and get in over these Big 12 teams. So right now, Arizona State's just 1 spot ahead of us, and Iowa State 1 spot behind us, BYU 2 spots behind us. So you would think that if teams like Iowa State beats Kansas State, who beat us, that they'll get ahead of us next week. I would be shocked if Iowa State won and did not get ahead of us. Arizona State is currently ahead of us. So if those teams continue to win, then Tulane will have to hope for Boise to lose and for them to win out. But if one of those teams is a 3rd-loss team, or maybe even BYU beats Houston and then wins the conference championship, and we win convincingly, we could still be ahead of them, which is pretty crazy. And that's if the BYU is a 2-loss Big 12 champion. At the CFP media teleconference last night, I asked the committee chair of the playoff, Ward Manuel, who's actually a Brother Martin graduate here in New Orleans, how Tulane and Arizona State compared. And he said that Arizona State was ranked ahead of Tulane because they had 2 great wins, in quotes here, against ranked opponents in Kansas State and BYU. And Tulane at this time has played Kansas State as their only ranked opponent. So we know that playing against ranked opponents is something that the committee really values. Army should hopefully be ranked again next week once they beat UTSA. So we're actually going to want Army to win, because as long as we win on Thursday, then we're automatically hosting. If we lose on Thursday, then playoff hopes are a little bit of a different story, but at that point, we'd hope for Army to lose because then we would still host the conference championship if we both lost in the final week. Thanks to the computer metrics, I've detailed that on my website, ipopstats.com. You can check that out. Also on my Twitter. But most likely, we want Army to win. They get ranked, and then we'll have a win against a ranked team. I also asked how the committee felt about Memphis and didn't get an answer on that when I asked it with Arizona State. I don't know if the committee chair was focusing on my first question and didn't remember that I asked a second question, or if the committee doesn't think highly of Memphis and didn't want to talk about it. I'm not really sure, so I wouldn't really put any weight into that, but it is something to consider. And then also on Tulane, he didn't say too much to me when I asked about comparing to Arizona State, but he did say that they played very well since the two losses to Kansas State and Oklahoma, as we know, but they felt that Arizona State is playing at a level that moved them ahead of Tulane. But he noted they're one away from each other, and they think highly of both. So that's why I'm saying, depending on how things shake out, Arizona State plays a not-so-great Arizona team, better than their record shows, but not great. If Arizona State wins that close and Tulane blows out Memphis, I would not be surprised if we get ahead of Arizona State again.
Definitely possible. Definitely possible. We have one more week of regular season play left. It's going to be a lot clearer then, but it's, of course, fun to talk about all the scenarios. We're close enough where we kind of see the paths now, so definitely worth talking about, but it's going to get more clear. Are you ready, Isaac, now to move on to talk about Tulane versus Boise State and their pitches?
Not quite, John. I just wanted to comment on Army. The committee chair also spoke about Army, and he said that Army has one of the worst strengths of schedules in the country, which is true. However, they've played really well against their competition, but the performance against Notre Dame and getting dominated did not bode well for them. He said that we moved them out of the top 25 based on what others had done behind them, in addition to their loss, and that they'll continue to monitor Army and that they think that Army is a really good team. So I think that there's a very good chance that Army is 26. So no matter whether they get back in or not next week, if they beat UTSA, I think that Army will be viewed as a pretty good win for Tulane. Let's talk about Boise.
Let's talk about Boise. I do have to give Boise State some credit. Love that blue field. Other than that, Tulane's the better team. Tulane is the better team. Tulane is better than Boise State. What's happening right now is Boise State is being ranked ahead of Tulane, and the reason they're being ranked ahead of Tulane is because they scheduled easier out-of-conference games than Tulane. Boise State scheduled one Power 5 or Power 4 conference game, which was Oregon, which they lost. Tulane scheduled 2, Oklahoma and Kansas State. So right now, the only reason that Boise State is being ranked above Tulane is because they played easier out-of-conference opponents. This is problematic for a couple reasons. The most problematic reason is that it discourages schools from scheduling exciting out-of-conference games if you're punished for it. Tulane is a better team than Boise State, but Boise State has one less loss because they played weaker teams out of conference. Right now, this is the comparison between Tulane and Boise State. We'll get into some more advanced metrics later, but just surface level stats here. Boise State's strength is their offense, primarily their run game. Ashton Jeanty is, one of two real Heisman candidates right now. He's electric. But if you look at Tulane's offense and how they compare against Boise State's offense, they are neck and neck. Points per game, they're separated by less than half a point. Rush yards a game, Boise State is 5th in the country. Tulane is 8th. That is very similar. So even if you take Boise State's strengths, Tulane is right there with them. Defensively, it's a completely different story. Tulane has proven over the course of the season that they have one of the best defenses in the country and a much better defense than Boise State. As you see here, Tulane's defense is ranked 12th in points. Boise's is 57th. Tulane's top 10 in yards allowed. Boise State, 65th. They also don't turn the ball over as much as Tulane does. That stuff is clear. Now, on top of that, Boise State has struggled recently, and Tulane has been blowing teams out. The eye test tells you Boise State is not as good as Tulane. We saw Boise State struggle 4 of the last 5 weeks, a lot of which was against some pretty bad football teams, including Wyoming, San Jose State, and Nevada. They struggled in all 3 of those games, and those teams combined are below 500. Tulane, on the other hand, in the last 3 weeks, won by 35, 46, and 31. That's not points scored. That is margin of victory. Another pro Tulane thing here, we have opponent adjusted EPA per play. It's expected points added per play, and it factors in things like garbage time, opponent quality, things like that. It's points added, expected points added above average. Boise State is exactly where you think they'd be on this graph. Far right, they have a very, very good offense. They have a very, very average defense. Tulane is kind of in a tier of its own. If you look at the top right, way up top and way to the right, that's Tulane, one of the best offenses and best defenses. But Boise State is ranked ahead of Tulane because they scheduled out-of-conference games that included Portland State, Washington State, and Georgia Southern, who, by the way, put up 45 points on Boise State's defense. Georgia Southern scored 45 on Boise State.
I agree, John.
Why should Tulane schedule exciting out-of-conference games going forward if the committee is going to reward teams like Boise State over Tulane for that?
I think that they should actually schedule some out-of-conference games against these autonomous 4 conferences. Oregon played really close with Boise State, and that's a huge, if not the biggest reason right now that Boise State is ranked so high, is that they played a really good team, ranked number 1 in the country, and played them close. So if the call went the other way with Kansas State, I think Tulane would be in the top 10 right now. So we're at least close to it, or at least top 10 by the end of the season. So I'm gonna disagree with you on that one. But I do think that we can beat Alabama. We have played 2 common opponents better than they have: South Florida and now Oklahoma.
That's true. They got blown out by Oklahoma, but Bama's still ranked ahead of Tulane. It's a lot of this SEC bias, Power 4 bias. I have a hard time believing that there are 12 teams more deserving of a playoff spot than Tulane, but we'll see how this unfolds. There are a couple nightmare scenarios here that hopefully we don't get there, but if we do, just want to kind of start to put them on people's radars. There's a scenario where Boise State loses to Oregon State this weekend and wins their conference championship, and then Tulane wins out, and they still put Boise State above Tulane, even though they would be objectively less deserving of the spot. That would be because they want Ashton Jeanty in the playoffs because he would draw probably higher ratings than Tulane. That would suck. It would be completely unfair. Then again, the ghost offensive pass interference call made by Big 12 referees in Kansas State's favor was also unfair, and it happens. But just want to put that on our radar. Similarly, there is a scenario where Colorado ends up getting a spot over Tulane, even if they have 3 losses, just because the committee wants the ratings of Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, and Travis Hunter. Hopefully those don't happen, but that's why it's so important to start making noise as Tulane fans. Be loud on media that includes YouTube, X, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you use. Repost Tulane content, comment on posts from national media members about Tulane. We need to unite this Tulane fan base and make sure that the College Football Playoff Committee hears Tulane and takes a closer look at Tulane's case for the playoffs as we come down here into the final weeks. What else can you do to help? Show up for Tulane versus Memphis on Thanksgiving night and show up for the conference championship against Army. A great atmosphere can only help Tulane. Tulane does need to take care of business in order to make it into the playoffs. If you want to see these kinds of playoff conversations continuing in years to come, donate to the collective. Every penny helps. We're going to need everything, not just to retain this roster, but when the portal opens, to add to it and get even stronger for next year. I think the bottom line is going into this weekend, cheer against Boise State, cheer against them every weekend, and then this weekend cheer against Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, and obviously cheer for Tulane. Isaac, we're getting close here to wrapping up, but you told me before we started here that you wanted to mention that you have one more. I know where you're going with this too. It's worth mentioning. You got one more way Tulane can sneak into the playoffs, a third and special path. Let's hear it.
I actually think you don't know what I'm going to say because I have a lot of different paths. There's two main paths.
It's not at large,
but there's a lot of different ways. I think the most important thing, far and away, and we've known this for a long time, obviously in all these scenarios you have to win out. But then Boise to lose their conference championship game. Beyond that, I haven't recalculated all the odds, but I think that Colorado Big 12 champion with 3 losses, only 2 in conference play, I don't see how they would get in over Tulane. They have more losses, and I don't think that they're as good of a team. So that is my second best path specifically. I think the third best path, as you outlined so well, why Tulane is already better than Boise. If they lose to a not good Oregon State team, I know they won the pack and stormed the field for being conference champions when beating
Wazoo. A 2-team conference.
But if Boise loses to Oregon State, I just would have a really, really, really hard time with seeing how Boise State would be ahead of Tulane, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. It would be politics is the unfortunate answer. But hopefully that doesn't happen. I have faith that it won't happen. I think also before we go, it's important to mention we've talked the main 2 paths are the Big 12 chaos, and then you also have Boise State dropping one. It's important to mention with the format where the top 4 conference champions get a bye, if Boise State drops one and the Big 12 chaos happens, Tulane could actually end up as high as the 4th seed because they would be ahead of Boise State and the Big 12 champion, whichever of the 2 teams is earns that 5th spot. So it's actually possible that Tulane is ranked in the top 4 and gets that bye, which would be incredible. So just wanted to go over that really quickly.
Yeah, they wouldn't be ranked in the top 4, but they would have a top 4 seed, just to clarify.
Right.
And I'm glad you brought that up because something that I have not seen anybody mention is that it is not just a dream anymore. It is very possible that Tulane gets a bye, then plays their first game in New Orleans. I don't know if you've thought about this, but they could play in the Sugar Bowl in the quarterfinals if they get a bye. I mean, either way, whether they get a bye or not, they can get to the Sugar Bowl in the quarterfinals. But they could be playing their first game in New Orleans and not have to leave New Orleans. If they win on Thursday, they host the conference championship. If they get ahead of Boise and the Big 12 after beating Army in the conference championship, then they get a bye. The game would be on December 20th that they would not have to play. Then they would get all the way to the end of the year without having to leave New Orleans if they were given the Sugar Bowl. It's not necessarily just based on location, but it would be a 1 in 4 chance, and probably better than that they would end up playing their first game in New Orleans in the Sugar Bowl. Imagine Ohio State coming to New Orleans to play Tulane in their first college football playoff game.
I'd certainly be there for that. I know you would too, Isaac, and I know you would also, person watching this. So, if you'd be there for that, then make sure you're there Thanksgiving against Memphis. And if we take care of business against Memphis, like we all know we're capable of, make sure you're there for the conference championship. Don't just go. Buy a ticket for your kid. Buy a ticket for your friend. Buy a ticket for your spouse. Buy a ticket for your grandma. We need to pack this stadium.
I have 2 final scenarios. I'm just going to mention. I'm not even going to get into them in detail because these ones are extremely unlikely. The bye in the Sugar Bowl It's unlikely, but it's not that unlikely. Not only is Tulane able to get a bye or potentially an at-large bid, but they also could sneak ahead of the ACC if Clemson loses to South Carolina, who's an out-of-conference opponent, then wins the ACC championship. That would need Miami to lose this week. All of that's certainly possible. Miami plays a good Syracuse team. That game's projected to be close. Clemson plays an out-of-conference opponent with South Carolina and then would be able to get into the conference championship and have to play SMU if Miami lost to Syracuse. Then the SEC is also still at play. I doubt this, but if Georgia gets destroyed, which is probably not going to happen, by Georgia Tech, and then goes to the conference championship and wins close against Texas A&M, if A&M beats Texas, I would not be stunned if in that scenario Tulane gets ahead of the SEC champion Georgia if they have 3 losses.
I would be stunned.
It's unlikely, but it's not that possible, especially if it's Texas A&M and not Texas in that championship.
Yeah, if it's Texas, then all bets are off. But
I agree with that.
So much has to happen there for this to even be.
Of course, but my point is anything is possible. This is why you have to watch every single game, not just Tulane games. The most important ones are the Tulane games, then Boise, then Big 12 chaos, and I'm just excited.
This is great. This is why the expanded playoffs, this is what we were hoping for when this was announced. This is why they did it. It makes it to where in November, Kentucky upsetting Ole Miss matters. These games, like everyone is still playing for something. This is exactly what we were hoping for. College football is more exciting right now than it has been any year in recent memory at this time of year because of the amount of games that significantly impact playoff seeding. It's awesome.
Absolutely, John. Can't wait for tomorrow.
Pack the stadium. Let's take care of business and let the chips fall where they may. I'll see you in the conference championship, Isaac.
#Pack Yeoman. Roll wave, John.
Roll wave.